Hello, everybody, and welcome to this panel about challenging but relaxing games. We're going to chat a little bit about our favorite games, about our own games, and why they are challenging and relaxing and how that all fits together. But first off, we're going to start with some introductions. Please, Aaron.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm a producer slash designer slash artist slash many hats at Aramite Games, and I'm working on Against the Storm, city builder roguelike game, which I think fits the description of this panel because it's a game about building cities in a hostile environment and surviving there, and yeah, it has roguelike elements, which are by definition, I think, challenging. Yeah, I think that's gonna be it for a short introduction.
And I'm Sam. I'm from Dunedin in New Zealand. I'm the creative director of Balancing Monkey Games. And our game, Before We Leave, is a mostly non-violent city building game set on a bunch of hexagonal tiled planets.
And I'm Philomena. I'm the co-founder of Stray Fawn Studio. We made Niche Nimbatus and recently The Wandering Village, which just came out last week. And both our games, Niche and The Wandering Village, I would say are challenging but relaxing strategy games in a way that you can take a lot of time to figure out what you want to do. You're not in a hurry to do anything, but you still have like a long-term challenge and goals that you need to meet. And if you don't, same as with Aaron, there's some permadeath roguelike mechanics and you will have to start over. So now that you know us, maybe to knock this off, we will start with our first question, which is what are your favorite games that fit the description of this panel? So what are your favorite challenging but relaxing strategy games, guys?
Yeah,
You go first if you've got one.
I didn't want to go first because it's a difficult question in terms of
It is, right? I
what
thought
I'm
it was
playing.
like, I thought when I wrote down the question, I was like, what is my favorite relaxing?
I have one game that is pretty niche and it's old, but I always go back to it. It's on GOG. You can buy it there. It's Alien Nations or The Nations 2. I think it's a German game. It's something like Settlers meets an RTS game. More, it's mostly like Settlers with villager needs and taking care of your villagers. With three different species you play as, and it's. I want to talk about it. It sounds like it was quite an inspiration for Against the Storm because we also have different species in our game and taking care of needs. But this game was more in the form of like completing missions, like in normal strategy games, and campaign missions and so on. But it was also very relaxing in the fact that the mechanics were pretty simple. There were only like 3 stages of city development, and you had to basically only worry about the needs of your villagers in different stages. Something like Pharaoh or all those Zeus games, the old like Sierra games, which are also like a good example for that. These are games I always go back to. I don't really play a lot of new games or AAA games. I mean some, but most of the time I go back to those older city builders.
Mm.
Maybe that's part of why it's relaxing because you know it so well already, right?
Yeah,
Maybe
it's
that's
like
the thing.
nostalgia. I think a
Mm.
lot of it is like playing the thing you knew from childhood. I think the same thing with Stronghold for me. I haven't played the new
Ooh.
ones yet, but yeah, the old ones, the Crusader and then the first one, I still play until today. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, they're pretty good. And when we were kids, it seemed like, at least for me, that those games are giant in their like scope and in their like difficulty. But now, when you replay them after a long time, after you've grown up, it's weirdly relaxing because you know those systems and there isn't anything that surprises you right now. So it's a bit of going through the motions, but at the same time, it's just having fun and relaxing after work mostly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably they also seem so huge because you were only allowed to play for an hour or two, right?
Yeah, that's true. There's also like the online component for that. I played as a kid. I played it like LAN-based, so it was always seemed bigger because the content was basically your friends.
Mhm.
Yep. I think one of the ones for me that springs to mind is the Anno series of city
Oh yeah.
builders.
Mhm.
Largely because I would always, like, as much as possible, turn off the NPCs, didn't play it multiplayer or anything like that. So I guess I was kind of playing it easy mode, but whatever, who cares?
Yeah.
And it was just kind of chilling out, building my cities and setting up the trade routes, and could be pretty relaxing. Especially 1404 or Dawn of Discovery, which is a few years old now, because I played it.
Yeah,
I think it's not quite my most played game anymore, but it was up there for a while. And I
It
just
had
felt
co-op,
so
right?
familiar. Oh, I might have, but I didn't play it.
It was really cool
Mm.
with the like you could build one city with your friend, for example. It
Nice.
was quite different than other co-ops.
That'd be pretty cool. But yeah, that was pretty relaxing, and I think it's like you said, part of it is just that familiarity of a game that I've played over and over,
Yeah.
which could take out some of the challenge, of course.
Have
How
you
about
played
you,
the
Phil?
new one, the
Sorry?
1800? Have you played
I
the new
did.
one, 1800?
Yep.
Okay.
I played through it once, and then I can't be bothered going back to it. I think possibly I've burned myself out on them. Played
Oh.
a couple of the previous ones
Why?
so many times. Yep.
I understand.
Yep.
So I think for me in this category, also a lot of the turn-based strategy games would fall into this. Maybe something like Fire Emblem or similar. I think just everything where I am not basically like where it's not time-based and have to be quick about doing anything just gets a very big relaxation bonus for me. And for example, with these kind of games, with the turn-based strategy games, I also really like to listen to audiobooks while I play them. So
Yeah,
then I
yeah.
have like a difficult turn that I have to do, but the story that I'm listening to is also kind of interesting right now. So I first listen to the story, and then I'm like, okay, now I can go back to planning it. And I don't know why, but my brain really likes this combination. Whenever I do it for 2 or 3 hours, I'm really immersed in both, and it's so weird
Okay.
because like it's so strong emotionally for me that even years later I remember that, oh, I was playing this level of Fire Emblem and in the story this was happening, and it's so strongly connected that it's still
Mm.
there 10 years later
Nice.
or something. But yeah, I mean, other than that, city builder games, also for me, God games. I don't know if you played Black and White,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
was something that really strongly fits the description of this panel for me. Yeah, everything
And
that has a pause mode is good.
yeah, and in God games, there's always like this because in bigger games, in city builder games, it's the scale of like your distance as a player from your villagers is a bit bigger, and in those God games, I think it's relaxing in the sense that you feel closer to your inhabitants basically at at some level, at some fantasy level, let's say.
Mm.
It's always like more relaxing to like care for each one of them. Like also the simulation games, like Oxygen Not Included, which are they are challenging, but at the same time, it's so relaxing watching your people like going to different like places in your colony, taking care of some stuff, and
Oxygen not
slowly
included
dying.
just
But
stressed me out.
yeah,
That
it's
was too much.
yeah, but I haven't played it for too long, but yeah, I really liked it.
Mhm. I think in
And
general, if you can just watch your little guys doing stuff and then you're kind of there and want to protect them.
Mm.
But it can really, for me personally, it can have a lot of downtime where I'm just going over, looking at what I did, and then at some point I want something to happen, but it doesn't have to be all the
yeah,
time.
it's also like very relaxing to in city builders to like watch buildings being built. I remember the game I mentioned in the beginning, the Alien Nations or the Nations. I don't remember what name they use right now because there's like a remaster of this. Uh, the building animations were very cool, and I remember as a kid sitting there and just watching them bringing like different stuff to the like construction site and slowly building up the building. It was a bit more advanced than, for instance, in Settlers 4, where the sprite was basically like piling up and being like created from the ground up. It had like interim stages where it had like the scaffolding, and then one wall was built, and at least that's what I remember from it. So it was really, really relaxing watching that too.
I just looked it up on Google so I can read about it later.
There's also one cool YouTube video from Seth. He's describing the game in a very humorous way. I haven't heard or seen anyone play this game on YouTube other than this bigger YouTuber. But yeah, I recommend it. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
There's also some games that are maybe closer to puzzle than strategy. It's hard to say. Like, did you all play Dorfromantik?
I did.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
waiting for the Switch release. Yeah.
Yeah, it's when is it on? In 2 weeks or
I
something?
think yeah. It's
Oh,
pretty
that'll
soon.
be cool. It'll be perfect.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming very soon. So
Have you
that's
played
something.
Islanders?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah,
Of course.
Yeah.
so another game that's very, very relaxing.
Mm.
Same like
That's also
vein.
a great one for audiobooks too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Dorfromantik in particular in terms of this this topic, and it's certainly got the relaxing, but the challenging is like there's just not quite enough there for me.
Mm-hmm.
But-
I think like if you try to attack the score in the game, that
True.
can be challenging,
Mm.
but it's mostly like you're fighting against yourself, like and trying to just beat a score, which is in a way challenging, I think.
Mm.
Not in the sense that you feel threatened by something from outside, like in some games, but the fact that you're stressing out about the score and where to place your tile to get the maximum amount of points.
I think
No, that's
what
very
really
true.
helps a bit. What really helps a bit is the missions that you have in the game.
Yeah.
That you have to connect like 30 trees or something. That always kept me, or is still keeping me, more engaged, because like, oh, there's another mission there, and that you can already see like on the board far away there's something there that you want to connect to. That's also what keeps me invested in it.
Mm.
But yeah, it's probably more on the relaxing than on the challenging side. Same with is it the same with Islanders for you, or is it more challenging?
I think it's the same. It's also like you can stress out about the score again, and that's like, because I think we all as people working on strategy games have this in mind, that players very often like to optimize their gameplay, and in games like Islanders, it's like the optimization is very easily seen in the UI, because it's a score for building placement. So it has an addictive like side to it, for me at least, where I'm like, okay, maybe I could do this better. Maybe if I didn't put this building there, then this one would. Same with Dorfromantik, basically.
Yeah, and I think
with
for both of
Islanders-
them, it's like they're as challenging as you want them to be. And for me, in playing both of them, I didn't find them particularly challenging because I didn't go particularly deep. But you know, if you want to, it's almost like a intrinsic versus extrinsic. You know, it's not giving you a challenge; it's allowing you to challenge yourself if you want to.
I especially when Dorfromantik came out, I was just looking on YouTube for videos of people like beating the high scores. I wanted to see how they play the game, just to see how many points you can squeeze out of that game.
I mean, on the very, very far end of the spectrum, even beyond Dorfromantik and Islanders, would probably be Townscaper, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Really just relaxing. And then they are kind of moving towards this side more. I think with Islanders, you also have to beat each island to go to the next island.
Yeah.
So that adds a bit more challenge for me compared to Dorfromantik. But yeah, there's a bunch of these games that are currently being developed. I'm very happy about that. It's also
I'm sorry.
It's fine. Islands and Trains, for example. I saw.
Yeah, I've heard about that one.
Yeah,
I haven't seen
Twitter
that one
recently.
It's kind of like Townscaper, but with trains as well, or something.
Oh, okay, that sounds cool.
Actually,
Okay,
and one more that I'll just add in quickly that
go
just
for it.
occurred to me. Kingdoms and castles.
Oh
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
I mean, yes, you're getting attacked, and that's a little bit stressful. But I mean, really, it's pretty easy to beat them off.
Mhm.
And
yeah, yeah.
other than that, you're just chilling out, making your city however you like, and building it up and stuff. That can be pretty relaxing.
That was one of the inspirations for our game, actually. The first
Mhm.
prototype for Against the Storm. I mean, it wasn't like mechanically similar, but graphically it was almost the same because we just used dummy boxes. And we thought, let's make it look more like Kingdoms and Castles. And we just colored the shapes in a way that it was pretty similar to the game. It was one game we spent a lot of time playing before developing our game.
Same.
Yep.
I've
Yeah,
played it a bunch also like for the UI and stuff because it
yeah,
feels
yeah.
like it's still casual enough to appeal to a broader audience, and we kind of tried to achieve that with our game too. So
Mm.
a
Yeah.
couple 100 hours of Kingdoms and Castles
The
distributed
game is
over
very
our team.
addicting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good
Yeah,
fun.
when it came out, I spent a lot of time. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if I'm the biggest fan of the combat though.
Oh
For
yeah,
me,
yeah. I mean,
somehow it wasn't needed, but I haven't played the newest version. I only played it when it came like out in early access a
Because they've
couple
added
years
like
ago.
multiplayer and stuff now, haven't they? Or are adding it?
oh wow.
Or an
Yeah,
I
AI
didn't
update or something?
something like
Was it
that.
that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that's right. It was AI enemies. Yeah, AI
Yeah.
kingdoms that they were adding.
So
Okay.
now I should probably give the
Maybe it's time to
combat
go
a
back
further
to that
go.
game.
Mm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely. Homework for over the weekend.
Yeah.
For the turn-based strategy games, such as Fire Emblem, I just realized that while I find them very relaxing and you have a lot of time to do it, and I also don't mind doing the levels over and over again, sometimes what stresses me out the most about the game is the RNG that it has, because you play it and for like a level can take like half an hour or something. And then I usually play it with permadeath. So if a character dies in the battle, they are gone.
Okay.
And then whenever I lose the level, I restart because you can't keep going on for a long time if you let all your characters die. So I try it again until nobody dies basically in the game. And then when you come to like the last enemy, which is usually a boss, and you are like ready and fully healed and want to attack them, and then they crit you, and there's no
Oh
way you
no.
could survive it, and the
Yeah.
chance was maybe like below 1%, and then you're like and then you have to start the level again, and just this feeling that there's a very small chance that even if I do everything perfectly, that could happen at the end. That's
Mm.
probably what stresses me out the most. So if I were the game designer of Fire Emblem, no crit hits on the final boss encounters.
Yeah,
That
especially with
is too
permadeath. That's
frustrating.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you choose yourself if you do it permadeath, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's just like you can't do anything about that. Even if
Mm.
you go there with your strongest character on the highest level, they can just insta crit you. And that's yeah. But it only happened to me maybe like twice or something. But that was
I
enough
mean,
to scar me for life. I can
you
never
still
just
remember that, so
Yeah.
that's
yes, absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, so I think we already talked a little bit about our own games in the introduction, but maybe let's talk a little bit more about them and why we decided to make them challenging and relaxing. What was our goal? How we did it? What kind of game mechanics and systems we implemented in them? Yeah, let's hear it.
So I'll go first. So my game is Before We Leave. Like I said before, it's a sort of mostly non-violent game set on a bunch of spherical planets. Um, and I mean, yeah. So I say mostly non-violent because we've had a few people come back to us and say, but there's all these things. Um,
What things are?
so the main thing is there's no enemies. You're not
Okay.
fighting against other tribes for land or any kind of combat or anything. There are leftover robots, so it's kind of post-apocalyptic. Like there was an apocalypse and you've survived and the world is healed and you're re-emerging into this healed world. and there's like little robots that will steal your resources, and other robots that will occasionally frighten your villagers that you need a wrestler to chase off, and giant space whales that come along and eat your settlements occasionally. But apart from that, so we basically, when I was making it, I was like, you know what, I don't think this needs any kind of violence in it, and then just did it that way, and it worked out pretty well. So it's got the relaxing in that, I mean, it's real time, but you can pause it, and there's no particular pressure. There's no disease. There's no fire. There's no your peeps, unless they get eaten by space whales, they don't die. So it's can be pretty relaxing because you can just kind of go at your own pace, chill out, do what you like. But it's also reasonably challenging. There's a lot of the sort of the logistics. All the resources are represented as physical objects that you need to get your peeps to carry from place to place and between different islands and between different planets. And I want to build this thing, but I need all of these various resources, and they're on my other planet, so I need to get them there. And I need to think about how am I going to do that. And that's the main source of the challenge. And then it's got a certain amount of environmental message to it. So buildings create pollution. You have to deal with the pollution. The pollution makes your people sad. So trying to keep all of that under control while also keeping your people happy by making them the things that they want and so on. So it's just that that combination of many little things that you're trying to just kind of balance as you go creates the challenge in it. So yeah, that's the easy version.
This is like very similar to the pitch of our game.
I know.
Like, except you are on the giant space whale.
Yep.
Essentially.
Oh, okay. Haven't seen described the.
Yeah, so essentially also with a little bit with the environmental message, there's not really violence except for plants that are trying to spread on your animal, like poisonous plants, and you are kind of incinerating them. So violence against plants. Also post-apocalyptic setting, and very similar with all the resource management and stuff. In our game, there's permadeath. I don't know if it's the same with Before We Leave.
It's basically
No, right?
impossible to lose.
Basically impossible to lose is nice.
Yeah.
The problem is when I make a game, it's usually cute, colorful, and way too difficult. Seems to be the case, at least with both the games that I directed. So now we added a bunch of settings where you can make it easier. We even you can turn off that the creature can die, that the villagers can die, and so on. So you can make it into a very, very relaxing, you basically just manage the happiness of your people kind of experience, or you make it very, very challenging in the veteran mode, and you switch off save and load, which in my opinion is something you should absolutely do in pretty much every game you play. I played way too much RimWorld. Have you played RimWorld?
Yep.
Yeah.
Way too many hours of RimWorld, at least 500 or something. And I realized that whenever I play with save and load, I'm so much less invested in the stuff that is happening. When I have it turned off, then I'm every single thing that happens, I'm oh my God, what's happening now? And I mean, that's less relaxing for sure, but way more engaging. So I kind of tried to give players their own settings and means of how much relaxing and how much challenging they want. But also the same in our game, you can just pause or you can fast forward if you're a little bit bored and basically want to skip to the next thing that is happening. So yeah, very similar.
Talking about the no save and load, one of my favorite gaming experiences is probably playing Hollow Knight with the Steel Soul or whatever it is. The one death and you're over. That was sweet. Winning that game on that was pretty cool. Sorry?
How did it work? How did it work exactly?
If you die, that's it. Game over. And as a difficult platforming game, you die a lot. So
yes.
Completely changes how you play the game, how you think about the game. It's quite amazing.
How does it change it?
Well, I mean, instead of being like, yeah, I'll die and start again, just try it again and again, you're like, okay, now I want to go to that place first because that's a really difficult fight. So if I can beat him, then that's out of the way. And then I'll go to these places because they're easy ways to power up. So you had to really plan out your whole
Mm.
run to think about what can I get easily and who can I defeat early so that I don't waste a whole playthrough by losing them to the later on. And yeah.
Cool.
It's a lot of pre-run planning involved in that, and
Yeah.
pre-knowledge of the game.
Yeah.
A little bit
Uh,
like Pokemon Nuzlocke or something.
Mm.
If you heard about those, that's
I haven't heard.
basically if you play Pokemon, but if the Pokemon dies in battle, it's basically dead, and you
Right.
have to
Okay.
release it. And you can only catch the first Pokemon that you encounter in an area, and yeah, you basically have to beat the game like that. And it can be
Wow.
pretty hard, depending on what you encounter where, and if somebody dies in a
Right.
arena fight and stuff. It's
Yeah,
like
it changes the
hardcore
approach.
fighting.
Yeah, it changes the approach of
Absolutely.
how you battle other Pokemon, I think, and the same thing is like in games like Darkest Dungeon, where you just can't save
Oh
scam
yes.
and load from a different point of the game. You just have to live with the consequences of that, and it's pretty cool. We have the same thing in Against the Storm, where we don't allow saving and loading at all.
At all? At all?
No, we don't have that. Some people don't really like that because they want a more relaxing environment, but it was pretty early on that we decided that our game has to have like real consequences to some stuff. And even with this like with this limitation of not being able to save and load, you only save when you quit the game and you go back in and you have to play from where you stopped. Even with that, some people have found some ways to, without like copying files, but in the game, some exploit that you can use to know what awaits you in this run, but that's unintentional. So we have to fix that. But in general, we in our game it's the same. You just can't load from and it's defeats the purpose of I guess of the relaxing part, but it's so ingrained in the design of the game that we try to find other ways for our players um, to find the relaxing aspects of our game, basically.
Which are?
Yeah, so this fluent, a fluent change into the topic. It's for us. We have different difficulty settings. It's one of the most important things when it comes to your experience with more relaxing aspects of the game. For example, we have like 4 basic difficulty settings, which is the normal, hard, very hard, and impossible, which we changed now with called it differently to be more lore friendly. But basically, these are like difficulty settings from the beginning, which you have. And on normal, the game is pretty relaxing. There some systems are even like turned off, similar like in your game, Philomena, and it's in the sense that players can experience most of the game, but not really need to worry about, for example, the mechanic, the sickness mechanic we have in the game, which is called Blight Rot, which can be punishing at some point. But after they beat the game and they feel comfortable with it on the lower difficulties, and they win it on the 4th, which is the impossible difficulty, they unlock like an ascension ladder. Like in Slay the Spire, for example. So then we have like 20 more difficulties you can beat.
Oh wow.
Uh, so if you really want to, you can basically like climb the game up to difficulty 24, where it's very punishing, very difficult, and you have to like think about all the other stuff around not only your game but like 3 steps ahead in the future. But yeah, if you just want to chill out, it's for us it's just a difficulty setting. And there's also like an exploration part in our game. We have each game you start in Against the Storm is basically in a big forest. This forest is like one of the biggest mechanics in the game. Yeah, we have different forests, different biomes, but for example, but every biome is basically a forest, just different type of trees. And one of the big mechanic is exploring the forest, which is like cutting through, like in Dungeon Keeper style gameplay, like cutting through a thick wall of trees to get into clearings where you can find different stuff, which are events, rewards, and so on. And we have normal clearings, we have difficult clearings like challenging clearings, they call dangerous in the game, and there are forbidden clearings. So the player can also, within their game, within where they decide which difficulty they take, they can also decide if they want to explore very heavily into those forbidden areas, which are very, very difficult and can be punishing, or if they want to stay in the more safer areas, which will be not that optimal for them to play, because the bigger rewards are in the dangerous areas. But if you just want to relax, you can focus on the less dangerous areas and discover only those glades clearings to have a easier time, basically.
Can you
Yeah,
beat
I
your
mean,
own game on difficulty 24?
myself, yeah, not really. I mean,
No?
I'm somewhere around, I think 15 is comfortable for me.
Mhm.
I mean 24 minus 4, so more like 19 is comfortable for me.
Mhm.
Our like lead programmer is comfortable at 20 easily. Our designer also, I think. I mean, we don't like keep score in the office, like who is winning with whom, but
Why
maybe we
not?
should. Maybe you
Yes.
should do a score
Yes.
attack in the office, because also every game is scored in our game. So every run you do, it takes around 1 hour, 2 hours. If you relax, maybe 3 hours, and that's it. And then you have to start a new city. So it's also scored, so you can compare your score with other people's scores. Yeah, it's easy to compete with other people in that sense, but it's also very difficult to balance at least the score aspect, because but intrinsically it's the score favors some type of gameplay, because you have to score the player based on some things they do. So it's hard to accommodate for every player, because sometimes you basically bias towards one playstyle or another. So the players have to find the meta for the biggest score, and but that's another different topic entirely. But yeah, just to sum up, I started with the no save, no loading stuff, and that was a big feature for us, because our game was from the beginning was the mix of two impossible things, which is a relaxing city builder and punishing roguelite. So we try to find the balance there. That's why there are difficulties. That's why there are like ways for players to mitigate a bit. And we also have like an upgrade tree with a meta progress, where for games you win, you buy stuff, you buy upgrades, you buy power, basically. So it also gets easier with time for you to have a more relaxing game, I think.
Yeah, it's the usual sort
Similar
of
to the
roguelike,
new.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah. Similar also to the new Darkest Dungeon game. Have you played it
yeah.
already?
I haven't
What's
played
your
the second
not
one.
yet? It's like, for me, the first one was like very unique on how they did the permadeath with the
Yeah.
characters. That you basically leveled it up and you equipped stuff, and then they could just die. Made me very involved. What I didn't like then about the first one, at least when I played it the first time, was when you always have, like, it's very hard, but you always have this progression in your village, so it gets a little easier over time. And then
Yeah.
there was an event that could also reset and destroy your village.
Oh.
Did you encounter that? I think it's if
No.
you take too long, because I
Right.
was taking a very long time, and when that happened, I rage quitted.
Okay, that's I mean, it's understandable to an extent, as from the game design perspective, but yeah, that wouldn't be something I would do in our game, like to reset the entire progress of the player, the
It's
meta
not the
progress.
entire progress, but
Okay.
some of the progress. And then I
Okay.
felt like I can't get anywhere, even if I'm just
Okay.
too bad at this game. I think I would
May
just have to get better at the builds of the characters
Yeah.
and learn how exactly, and I probably would need to read some guides, and I didn't want to. And then later I found out that you could pretty easily, like, avoid the event by just sacrificing one of your people. And
Okay.
then, yeah, that's when I just started sacrificing the newbies.
Nice.
Guilty.
I mean, it could be a cool way of because in our game we have a problem because if you have this loop of acquiring resources, buying upgrades, at some point people start having too much resources, too many resources, and yeah, if you reset the meta progress once in a while based on I don't know some factors, maybe that could be an interesting choice for those high-end players to give them something new to strive for. But I think it's very frustrating to like delete something that you worked for.
Are there
I mean, we do
players
it.
Are there
Sorry.
players who manage to beat level 24 in your difficulty setting?
Yeah. I mean, they
Yeah?
even like have guides on YouTube
Wow.
how to do it, which is really cool. Recently we were debating about achievements because you wanna have achievements in the future in the game. And we were thinking about should we add like an achievement to beat the last difficulty level in the game, because at some level it's a cool goal to strive for. It's a ladder, so even if you're not the best player at the beginning, you can slowly work your way up. But at the same time, it's an achievement that is not really accessible to people who just can't beat the game on 24. So it's whatever we decide. And for me, it's always okay to have an achievement like that if it's not like every achievement or if it's not the majority of achievements, because I really want players to have like this one big exclusive thing to strive for. But maybe you guys have different opinions on that.
I think you should absolutely have one or two super hard achievements.
Yeah, I think it's
I'm always a
sorry.
bit scared of the I want to get all achievements people
Yeah,
because they can be very intense if they are missing one and they can't get it.
yeah.
At least that's what we experienced in our community.
Oh, okay.
But go for it. Go for it.
I mean,
Yeah.
I get the frustration of achievements that require, for example, playing the whole game through like 60 hours on a very hard difficulty with only one character. I'm looking at you, plus of eternity, which is difficult to get, and I couldn't do it. But at the same time, there's like a part of me that understands that okay, this achievement isn't for me. I'm not the collector. But yeah, maybe the collector type players will be frustrated by that even more.
Maybe a bit.
Well, if they want to collect all of them, they can take on the challenge.
I mean, it's always like a bit easier to ask the player to win one game. It takes 2 hours on the highest difficulty versus asking them to play an entire game of 60 hours.
Yeah, that brings me to a related topic. You said your runs are usually like 2 to 3 hours, and in Sam's game you can't really die or you can't really fail and have to restart. In our game, you have runs that are 10+ hours and you can still die. And I think it's a little bit of a bold game design decision. And I don't think I would have been able to take it if Don't Starve didn't show me that it's okay.
Right.
So like I played a lot of Don't Starve, also a lot of Don't Starve Together. And for me, this experience, when you really spend like 10 or even 20 hours in a world and then you die and it's so painful, and I still remember the world, how it looked, where the different areas are, like weeks after I played it, I'm like, this world is now gone forever. And that's such a strong feeling that I kind of wanted to do it as well. But without this game, that would have encouraged me. I probably wouldn't have dared. Once again, back to the to Darkest Dungeon, because the second part is much more of, I would call it, your usual roguelike experience, where you do runs, and then if you only have a set of characters from the start, it's always the same. I mean, you can pick a little bit, but basically if all of them die, basically the game is over. You don't get more characters, and then you have like meta progression. When you die, you unlock some more characters and some other stuff. And at first I was a little bit like, I liked it the other way more in the first part, but then I warmed up to it quite quickly. So I think the initial feedback was also a bit harsh. also on the balancing and stuff, and they like implemented a new way that your characters can bond with each other, and then they
Okay.
support each other, or if they hate each other, they backstab each other and so on, which is also interesting. And it got a bit of harsh feedback, but in my opinion, it's very cool, and I think they improved it again. So I definitely recommend checking out the second part too.
Cool.
I have to play it. Yeah, I still
Definitely. Yeah,
haven't
when it
gotten
came
to it.
out in early access, I was
Mm.
obsessed like the whole weekend
Nice.
until I finished I wouldn't stop until I finished my first run.
Nice, nice. Yeah,
Absolutely.
with the thing about like giving players the ability to fail after like 10 hours or more was something we also were thinking about, because our game has two layers. It has the city builder layer, and then there's the world map layer where you have a giant world map which is like divided into hex grids into hex tiles, and you choose which tile you want to play on next, and the city like stays there, and you can trade with that city you built previously and so on. So we wanted to have like it's still not in the game, but we wanted to have like a overarching goal for the player, like something to achieve on the world map. And because you know, one game takes 2 hours in Against the Storm, and for example, getting somewhere on the world map takes like 5 games, because you extend the reach of your like civilization by a small amount every game. So in the end, it would be like 10 hours or more to get to the end of the map. And we thought that giving a player then the opportunity or the chance to fail, it would be very devastating to player, because they would have to start over. The journey to the edge of the map would be to begin anew. But yeah, when you said about don't starve, I think that's also like a cool insight, because maybe we shouldn't be afraid of that. Maybe players can tolerate a bit of failure in a longer session than only in the shorter ones.
I
But yeah,
like that was one of the things that I was most scared of would like
yeah,
really
yeah,
draw down our reviews when the game's coming out.
yeah,
But so far, not a lot of mentions. I mean, you can also turn on save and load in our game. So maybe
yeah, yeah,
that's what really makes it less punishing, because you don't have to play in this way if you don't want to, which you can't in Don't Starve. Don't Starve made so many bold decisions in its game
yeah,
design.
yeah.
I think it really, like, also, there's no tutorial. You just have to kind of figure it
Yeah, that's
out. And
very
if you
bold.
don't, you die in the first night. And that's just, yeah, next time you do it better.
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
never dare to
A
do
lot
it
of those
like
things
this.
can work perfectly if you're just really careful with the design. It's like,
Mm.
if you're able to play a 10 or 20 hour game and then lose, so long as it's built so that the player thinks that it was fair, then you can get
Mm-hmm.
away with it. And if it's like, I lost and I can see why and I can see what I did wrong, you
Mm-hmm.
know, um, then it can be seen as fair. And the same with tutorial. I've played games with no tutorial that were just utterly enraging. I tried to play Astroneers, and the
Mm-hmm.
tutorial is a set of like videos that are outside of the main game, and I just could not grasp it at all.
yeah,
But
yeah,
then
Mm-hmm.
other games, there's no tutorial as such because everything is just clear and laid out properly, and the game
yeah,
teaches itself to you as you're playing, and it works just fine. So it's one of those things, if you want to take the chance on something like that, you can. You just need to have the design chops to get away with it, I think.
yeah. I think that there are some things you can do to like mitigate the negative influence of that. Like you said, like gradually introducing systems
Mm.
without really a tutorial is a good idea. Like losing a game you think was fair, and plus giving the player, for example, a small reward for that. Because in our game, it's like if you lose, you still get something. You
Yeah.
can you can still like buy an upgrade maybe after 2 lost games. So you always have the feeling like, okay, that wasn't for nothing. At least I can buy an upgrade and maybe level up and get new buildings.
Mm.
So that will help me in the future. So yeah,
I'm also
there are
thinking
some
about
tools.
adding this maybe at some point, but I'm not sure yet. Also,
Uh,
our runs are so long for the Wandering Village, but I would actually like some kind of meta progression. But at the point of the early access release, we just didn't have enough content to hide it behind anything. But
I
if
mean,
we have a bunch of content, maybe.
it's always like a double-edged sword, as
Mm.
with almost everything in game design, where like because our first version of the game, for example, was when you first released the meta progression was mostly giving you new buildings, new blueprints. Because in our game you have like building drafting with each like segment of the gameplay. So you get one reputation point and you get the choice of buildings. And those buildings, you never have all of them. They have more recipes for like things they do than just one. So even if you don't have a lumber mill, you can have like a carpenter, which makes planks but a bit worse. And yeah, that's all. The entire system is basically not a production chain, but it's more of a production web. So it's to avoid like blocking the player. But that's not the point. The point is that in the first version of the game, we gave those blueprints in the meta progression tree. And players started to do a thing which I think was really clever. They stopped buying upgrades because they wanted to have a smaller pool of buildings, so it wouldn't be diluted by buildings that are not really, in the meta and that are not really that good. So they started like avoiding some upgrades, and we even gave them the choice to avoid them because we didn't require you to buy the previous upgrade to then buy the next one. So they picked and choose which one they want, and the meta progression wasn't working too good back then. And since then, we changed it to like buildings that are unlocked flat by levels, and the meta progression gives you new features or just power upgrades, which is, I think, more. It's just better for the game at some point because people don't abuse the system to build up a meta deck that always wins.
No, you made a deck builder.
Yeah, unintentionally.
Accidentally.
Yeah, we didn't want that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you talked a little bit about an end game goal. What's your
Yeah.
opinion, Sam, on having an end game goal in a city builder? Is it something? I'm a little bit like I want to have it because I want to tell a story, but I want people to be able to keep playing after it's done. And are they still motivated after it's done? Would it be better if it was just open-ended, so, like Don't Starve? What's your opinion?
Mixed, I have to say. So in general, when I'm specifically with city builders, but games in general, if I reach the end of the story, if I reach the final goal, I'm unlikely to keep playing because it's like I've unlocked everything, I've learned everything, I've experienced everything. So sure, the corpse may keep twitching, but it's basically dead, kind of thing. If it's a good game, I'm perfectly happy to go back to the start and play it through again and experience that same progression and story over again. But in general, once I get to the end, I'm done. On the other hand, I think it's perfectly reasonable for those sorts of games to have a sandbox mode where there is no, there aren't the same limits, there isn't the same story progression. It is just me playing around, doing what I feel like within the world. And then, of course, it makes sense that the player can just go on as long as they want. And so, a hybrid model where you have the story and you're going through it, and then effectively you transition into sandbox mode where the player can keep playing more if they want to. It makes sense. But I don't know. Well, for me at least, I generally wouldn't.
Does your game have an end?
Yes, it does, and yes, you can keep playing after that if you want on the same world. Yeah.
Is there a motivation to play another round once you reach the end?
I mean the planets that you so there's lots of difficulty settings. You can choose how many planets you've got. You can choose how many resources you've got and how dangerous pollution is and all sorts of other things, and whether you've got the old robots and space whales and all the rest of it or not. So you've got lots of difficulty settings you can play around with. And the planets and the terrain that you encounter are completely procedurally generated, so you can play again and it's all different the next time through.
Got it.
Yeah.
I kept thinking whether we should make the hardest mode in our game an unlockable, kind of like Aaron did, because then it feels like now I have earned to play the hardest difficulty, which makes it, at least for me, makes it more likely that I actually do it than if it was there from the start. I don't know why exactly I feel like that. I think the ladder is a great way to keep people coming back and playing again and again with not it's a bunch of design effort, right? But then making level 20 from level 19 is not that difficult. How are you handling your difficulty levels, by the way? I'd be curious. Now you always see me here. It's because I'm taking notes of all the interesting stuff you say that I have to add to our game.
I mean, that's I'm taking mental notes here too on some stuff. I mean, for us, it's the difficulty progression is a bit easier to manage than custom difficulty settings, for example, because every difficulty level adds basically a modifier to the game. They don't progress in a sense that every difficulty has some different challenge. It's more of a like compiling challenges. So on Prestige 1, for example, the game is just longer because in normal games you have to amass 14 reputation points, and in Prestige 1 you have 18. So the first thing the game asks you to do is on the Prestige levels is basically show us that you can gain those reputation points more than required normally, because we have like different ways of acquiring those reputation points, which are orders from the queen, and they are limited. So you don't have like unlimited orders. You have like only 12, 10, 9, depending on the difficulty setting. So you have to get 18 points, but only 10 for them can come from orders. So the rest you have to get through, for example, villager resolve, which is like their happiness, and if it's high enough, they will generate the points, or through exploration. So that's the first like modifier. Then we add a second modifier that the sickness is more punishing. So a bit like pollution and before we leave, it's like, so right now you have to gain 4 more points, plus the sickness is more punishing. You have to take care of that a bit more. And then it's like trader prices are higher. And then it's like events are a bit more difficult. So it's, or the orders from the queen are only harder difficulty level, because orders have their own difficulties. That's also one thing. So after like 20 levels of that, you have like a stack of modifiers basically the player has to deal with. But they learned how to deal with them one by one through like leveling up on the ladder. So at level 20, they just, it's not like they start a game and they have like 20 modifiers they have to now learn. It's more like, okay, so I managed to beat this small part of the game. Now there's one more like grain of sand in the cogs of this big machine, and I have to deal with it.
Are there some examples for modifiers?
Yeah, so the one with the longer game I mentioned, the 4 more reputation points, the sickness being a bit more difficult,
Got it.
trader prices being higher, construction prices being higher, all orders are difficult, for example, so all orders require more you to do more. Hunger penalty is higher for your villagers, so if you allow them to be hungry, it will be more punishing than usual. So these are like very small changes to the overall difficulty, but they grow with time to a bigger problem for the player. Not all of them, we're not happy with all of them, I have to admit. It's still early access, so we're gonna probably readjust most of them. Not most, but at least some of them will be changed. But it works pretty well because it keeps the players engaged. They talk about it a lot. It's probably one of the most like talked about topics on Discord, where people like talk about how they beat a difficulty, how they like manage to do something on a given difficulty. So it's always cool to see like this traffic going and people talking about this stuff.
You get inspiration for this from somewhere, or is it
Oh
your
yeah,
own invention?
from us, for us, it's most of the things we do is basically with the players. So we've been in early access for 10 months now on Epic. So so we had 10 months to like speak to the player base, collect their feedback, and we have like this development schedule that's basically every 2 weeks we do something new for the game. So there's like clockwork, every second Thursday we get new content to the game, new balance, and so on. So the game always keeps feeling fresh. We always address some problems we found, some player feedback. It has its downsides because if you have like this bi-weekly schedule, it's harder to plan something, for example, like half a year ahead because you don't have the development resources just to hide in a bunker and develop something for half a year. But at the same time, it's a cool approach because for us, it's just perfectly, it's like developing games on cheats with your community. They give you inspiration, they give you feedback. You implement that, you see if it worked or not, and that's how the game progresses, basically. So yeah, most of the modifiers are like inspired by other roguelikes and our players, basically.
Got it. How was the development process for you? Sorry, or go ahead, whatever you want to say.
I was just I was going to ask how you found balancing those modifiers as you add them. Were there any that were like this massive jump in difficulty or whatever? But you kind of answered what I was going to ask because you're in early access, so you can stick in the modifiers and then go, oh, that one was terrible. Let's just squash it down
that's
a bit.
basically that's basically our approach, to be honest, because there are some right now some difficulties that players have pointed out that are the like biggest spikes. For example, I think the first one is a positive because players wanted a longer game, so the 4 additional reputation points are a plus. But the harder sickness can be punishing at some point. The trader prices are just devastating to some players because you can buy, like in Slay the Spire, you can buy perks from traders and resources in our case. So if you have to pay like 50% more for that, it can be punishing because the amount of money or resources you get from your game stays relatively the same. So it's basically everything is worth less. Or construction cost is also one thing that can be spiky because we have some resources that are limited. For example, wildfire essence is a resource that's used to build hearths, which are very important buildings in the game. And when the hearths cost like twice as much as they normally would cost, then you have to find more wildfire essence in the world, and that's also like challenging at some point. So there are spiky effects, modifiers players can get, and we'll probably iron them out in the future.
Cool.
Sam, can you tell us a little bit about how you approached your development process?
Well, I mean, so this is my first game, and I started it just as a hobby project. So I was just like, what's a game I would like to play? I guess I'll start making that. And it was, I went through a journey of winding up getting some funding, which allowed me to work on it full time, and then got the Epic exclusive, and they gave me a developer advance, which means I could hire people and all the rest of it. But it meant that there was a good year and a half where it was just me, and I could just kind of play around with it and add what I felt like and that kind of thing. Which, I mean, it's had its positives and negatives. It means, like, unlike an early access game where, as you say, you're really playing, giving players what they want, there was a certain amount of, well, here's a thing, I hope you like it.
How did they like it?
Oh, they seem to quite like it. We did. We said the game was going to be early access because, frankly, we were about to run out of money. But then we got some more funding and keep going for a bit longer. And then we didn't do a good job of saying that actually now it isn't early access. So a lot of people reported it as being early access, even though technically it wasn't. But then right through the year of Epic exclusive, we released like 6 or 7 free updates. So it's like, it kind of was really anyway.
Yeah.
Did you have player feedback where both, did players tell you both that the game was too challenging and too easy? Did you encounter this problem?
Yep. In particular, it was a fair way after release. We had some players complaining that it was too fast, even on the slowest speed. So we ended up adding in like half and quarter speeds as well as 2 times and 4 times speed. And I think so our game it's fairly easy really. It's not a overly difficult game. So some like experienced city builder people would come in and be like, "Wow, this game is weirdly easy. What's going on?" and feel like they were missing something or whatever. But we were like, "Nah, we didn't make the game for you. It's all good. You can go and play the hard games, or turn the difficulty settings up if you feel like it."
Got it. What would you do different if you would do it again now?
I mean, more player feedback, and I mean, I've got a team around me now, so there's now 7 of us instead of 1 of me.
Oh wow!
So
Very nice.
that's a huge. I mean, it makes something slower because you've got to like talk to more people. You can't just think about it and do it. But that, just that feedback of both this feedback of design within the company and feedback with players. So long as you do it right and you listen to it correctly and don't just take all the feedback as gospel and all that sort of thing, that
Yes.
can be very powerful.
Yeah, it's so easy to just run after every feedback that you get, and in the end you have something and you don't even know anymore what it's
just
supposed to be.
having to sit there and go, okay, what are they actually wanting?
Yeah, that's very, very important. Like, see what are the motivations behind the feedback and not exactly what are the words, because sometimes the feedback can be about something entirely different than it's stated in the words spoken.
Exactly.
Before, we also talked a little bit about when the player understands the failure and takes it as their own mistake and wants to do it again, then it's okay even to die after a long run. How do you make sure the player understands their mistakes? Because I find this so difficult.
It's so hard.
No idea.
I mean,
Right?
I think that's one of those things that the really good games get right, and it's just kind of magical. And how you do that, I don't know. If I manage it, I'll tell you.
It's
we'll
black
do this
magic.
panel again in 20 years. Maybe we have figured it out.
Yeah. I mean, it's for us, it's a lot of like working on the UX to at least tell the player on the user experience and the user interface to at least tell the player, hey, something in your settlement is not working right. Look at it. But that's the extent to which I feel comfortable with like this topic, because as Sam said, it's extremely difficult to like clearly communicate to the player. I mean, maybe it's one part of the game having very clear rules, and probably the smaller the game, the rules, the more understandable the rules are, the more the easier it is to like tell the player, hey, that was your fault right now, and try again. I think with like a simplistic platformer, it might be easier than with a game that's based around logistics and based around many different things happening at the same time, off screen, on screen, and so on. So for strategy games, I think it's very challenging at that.
Yeah, I think the one important aspect of it for strategy games, for city building games, is not to have any sort of uncorrectable death spirals. Like, this thing goes wrong, so that thing goes wrong, so that thing goes wrong, and there's just nothing you can do about it. And even if the player hasn't realized it yet, there's like they're playing for 2 hours and they're going to lose.
Yeah.
And if you don't have anything like that, it's like if you lose, then looking back, it's like, okay, I did that wrong and I did that wrong and that went wrong and I responded incorrectly and then I lost. And that feels fair. Whereas like everything was going wrong and there was nothing I could do about it and then I lost is unfair and just would feel horrible.
And even that is, I think, better than it's probably a cursed problem in some strategy games, or in most maybe even, where you have like this, you play a round of like Civilization and you do everything right, you think you do everything right, you play for 10 hours, but actually you lost the game at the first hour, but you only find out about it after 10 hours. So that I think is the most frustrating thing, to like the gameplay is extended because the game allows you to and to make those mistakes and not really telling you about them. At the same time, there was no chance of winning because you just made a mistake in the beginning, and I say it's a cursed problem because I'm not sure if it's like fixable. Maybe it is. I'm not really that good of a designer to speak about that, but I think it's at least one part of this problem is like clearly communicating to the player or giving them an earlier point of failure so they can restart without the frustration of a lot of the things that come after many hours of playing a hopeless game.
And mouse overs for everything. Mouse over
Yeah,
information on every single object that exists in the game.
nested
God.
tooltips, like
And then you find out that your publisher wants to port your game to consoles.
Dun,
yeah.
dun, dun.
Yeah.
That's one thing we're thinking about a lot because we have like tooltips for most stuff. We don't have really nested tooltips, most of the time only one big screen is opened. One big window is open on the screen. It's not like in some city builders where you can configure different small screens on the screen. So I think it's going to be easier for us to port the game at some point because we really wanted to. But at the same time, we're constantly adding new UX and UI solutions for the players, and they're great because they help the players understand the game. But at the same time, I know as a producer that we're getting further away from the goal of porting the game because of that. But it's, I think, still manageable.
We have to release an Xbox version at some point next year. So I'm very deep into this problematic. But also, we kind of designed the game a little bit from the beginning so that it would be okay with a controller, and the controller support has been existent for a while. But yeah, whenever we add stuff, and sometimes it's also, it's hard. We want to add something, but you already know that it will be very hard with the controller, and then you can have to. But you want it to be, it's like a PC game, right? So first and foremost, it's a PC game, and you really want to deliver that, and then you have to find a workaround for it and the controller support. And yeah, we even had one game that we made that we weren't. So we made, this is our third game now, right? So, and the first one we managed to port, which is the strategy game, and then the second one, which is a simulation game, we couldn't port at all because the input was just not suitable for controllers. And now with the third one, we made sure from the beginning that it's doable. But yeah, that's a.
I think a large part, having gone through it once, of making a game portal is just making sure you've got controller support in. Because a lot of people, I think these days, even if it's a PC game, they still, if they're able to, will play it with a controller. So it actually, it expands your audience and it gives you potential, accessibility benefits and all sorts of things. And of course, if you can play the PC game with a controller, then all of the UX that goes into making it a console game is already in there. You have to think about those things up front.
Yeah. I
And
think
Steam Deck
Steam Deck makes it a bit easier. I mean, because you can already, without porting a game, just try it out on the platform that is like the Switch, and there are people like creating their own configurations for your game, even if you're not really supporting it. So it's it's a bit easier at the same time to think about it now and to test it out earlier.
Absolutely. So one question that I still have, or it's not really a question, but it's just from before when we talked about difficulty settings, is one thing I really love, like probably my favorite kind of difficulty settings there is how RimWorld does it with their narrator approach. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
So basically at the beginning you can not only choose difficulty, but you also select on like how your story is being told. And I think that gives player a completely different set of like a better understanding also of these kind of settings, and just a completely different approach on how to play the game, other than just basically, okay, it's harder to survive, less, or like people eat more, people eat less. But with with their narrators. Like you can say, okay, if I am in a bad situation, I think they're called like their personality. So there's like classic Cassandra. So if I'm in a bad situation, something good will happen and it's going to be a good story. Or there's Randy Random, where everything that happens is just random. And to give players this kind of influence over how the game actually works. And I don't think it's probably hard to implement, but not impossible. And it just gives you such a different connection to the game. Yeah, I really want to do something like that too. Have you considered something like that for your games?
It'd be awesome. No.
Right?
Now I'm like going,
we had
okay, now I'm thinking about our next game. Maybe we should do something like that.
with this game, we really like tried to move away from heavy story stuff, at least to an extent. I mean, we're still using it in tooltips and like world storytelling, but in like narrator style storytelling is it would be cool, but none of us is really comfortable with creating.
It's not really a narrator. It's just how the randomness in the game works. Basically, you choose the narrator, but then if you pick the random narrator, then events just happen randomly. And if you pick the classic narrator, it will switch between, like, if you're doing good, something bad will happen. If you're doing bad, something good will happen. You know,
So like
and
a
there's
director
a
of the...
third one, but I
like
can't
a
remember exactly what it
director.
does. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that sounds really cool. I mean,
That's really
it sounds like that's something that would be useful, because at least from a design perspective, because I don't know if you guys have the same in your game, but we are constantly like thinking about the RNG in our games and how because even if you don't have like this death spiral in your game, or even if you don't have like an easy winnable game, there's always like small spirals somewhere in the gameplay. So balancing them out with something like this would be extremely useful, and especially if this the story connected to that.
Right? Absolutely. So that concludes all my questions. Do you still want to add something? Or are we finished for today?
I think we
I
might
think
be
we're
done.
finished.
So we already scheduled the next panel in 20 years where we figure out how to teach the player what went wrong.
Yep,
Okay.
definitely.
Perfect.
When you're
Hopefully we
old.
can still chat with each other in between then. And for everybody who was watching the panel, thank you very much, and we wish you a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.